Well, I stand strong on those that come before me. I have to call on my ancestors and let them know that I have not forgotten them. I stand strong because I stand on the shoulders of your ancestors as well. I want them to know that I have not forgotten them. I am an activist. I've always been an activist. I always will be an activist. And I became a food activist because my son, Wade, developed food allergies at a very early age. He's allergic to all dairy products, shellfish, eggs, and peanuts. And I wanted to get the healthiest food that I could for him. I wanted food that was free from genetically modified organisms. I wanted food that was free from pesticides. I wanted food, basically, that was grown healthy, organically. I really wasn't any different than any other mother in my community. I wanted the best for my son. I want the best for both of my children. But that food, the best food, was not available in my neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. So to change that situation, I got involved with what I really didn't know at the time was food justice. We started converting vacant lots to urban farm sites, lots that had not been used in decades, to grow food on them. We started to hire people from the community, and we started to build what we thought would be a local food system that responded to urban concerns. And so for me, the food system looked something like this. It was very simple, not too complicated, but that was what I understood the food system to be. And then I was introduced to this larger food movement, the one that says, you know, you have to eat well, don't eat too much, eat mostly plants. I'm like, yes, I got that. I'm with that 100%. But where's my food? And I live in a community where I can get a semi-automatic weapon quicker than I can get a tomato. Now, a lot of people have tried to make this statement cute. They said that you can get ketchup quicker than you can get a tomato. I want us to really appreciate the public health message that I'm trying to get across here. And it's that the public health issue of violence is connected to the public health issue of chronic diet-related diseases. It's not about cute phrases or cute terms. It is about life and death. In my community, it is about living or dying. You can die by the gun or die from a lack of the proper food. But still, the food system has not changed. I've done all this work. We know all of these things, but the food system still, my idea of the food system still remained like that. And then I started to think, you know, I really have to step this up a notch. What is Food Justice 2.0? Well, for me, Food Justice 2.0 is really about the narratives of people of color and beginning to understand that the story that we tell ourselves in the food movement is as important as the stories that we've left out. So for me, the food justice movement tells the story of colonialism and the impact of historical trauma on communities of color. Food justice talks about manifest destiny. It talks about settling the land in the West, the 19th century philosophy. It's like, we're going to go west. We're going to settle the land. But in food justice, we know that there were Native American people there. We know that they were pushed off of that land, and many of them killed so that others might be able to live. Now, we know that that's not the fault of the arriving European immigrants. We understand that the importation of African slaves into the United States, the enslavement of the Africans, provided the labor for what we now call our industrial food system. At the very beginning, folk were forced to work the land, and they had no choice in the conversation. They were not paid. At the core of what I believe to be the problems in our community, particularly when we start to talk about the accumulation of wealth or the lack of health, is really the conversation around slavery that has not been had in the United States. We have not reconciled the event of slavery or its impact. So for us, food justice is not just about the nutrition. That's important. It's not just about growing the food, but it's about dignity. It's about being visible. The 1960s also represent a time where the Black Panther Party started the free breakfast program in Oakland. We call these things into being because sometimes in the narrative of the larger food movement, it gets lost. In the 1960s, we talk about the hippie generation and the back to the land movement and the beginnings of organic food, and all of that is true and wonderful, and we like those stories too. Both and have to exist. And so we have to begin to tell a narrative or tell a story and develop a narrative that's much more robust than the narrative we tell ourselves today. We must also include in this narrative modern day slavery. We cannot forget that our food system today is still based on the exploitation of the labor of immigrants in this country. While we are talking about access to free-range chickens and grass-fed beef, we need to also be talking about immigration reform, fair wages for those farm workers, and the entire food chain workers also, the people who serve us, the people who fix our food, also should be paid fairly. We have to say no to food deserts. I don't live in a food desert. I never have. Food desert, the phrase, is another one of those cute terms, masking the harm of the food system in my community. It really is the Trojan horse of increased corporate control of the food system. I was not digging in the dirt on the west side of Chicago, thinking that I sure will be glad when that Walmart comes and builds that store there. That was not my thought. And yet there's still people who are hungry. There has never been a fair, just, or healthy food system in the United States of America. And so what we have is a global food industrial complex. This is what we have to dismantle. This is what we have to address. And there's a way to address it. We can be successful if we're able to really recognize that we have never, ever had a food system, and we must join together, create a narrative where all of us can sit around the table and create the food system that we need.